Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Slow Takes. I'm Sam Illingworth, who writes the Slow AI Substack, and I'm joined today by, as ever,
As always, I'm Lior from Exploring ChatGPT.
and thanks very much, everyone, for joining us on this Substack Live, for watching via YouTube, or for listening to us wherever you get your podcasts. If you're on the Substack Live, feel free to hammer that like button, ask us any questions that you want, and we will get to them. Share your expertise, which is many and varifold. And if you're on the podcast, just give us a 5-star rating and leave us a review. It really helps us to share the love. Likewise, hit those thumbs on YouTube. So for people who do, and I guess don't know this show, basically every Monday, Leo and I come together and we try to share with you 5 pieces of AI news. And we try to do it without hype and without BS, in a way that just enables us to slow it down, to stop flooding the zone, and to try to bring balance. And Leo and I don't agree on everything all the time, but we, try to do so, try to disagree in a civilized way. And again, always bowled over by how many people join us. So thank you very much. And please do ask questions and feel free to contribute as well. Just a few shout outs. Hi, Farida. Hi, Troy. Hi, Georgina. Hi, Rosemaria. Hi, Alex. Hi, David. So 5 stories this week. You'll be pleased to know I've even managed to find a good AI story in there as well. It didn't actually take that much hunting around this week, so that's cool. So the first story which jumped out right for me, Lior, was this news around ChatGPT 5.6. So basically, OpenAI was about to launch its latest frontier model, ChatGPT 5.6, and the Trump administration said, "Hold on a second, we don't want you to do that. What we want you to do is we want you to test it with a few trusted sources first, then report back to us." And for me, this is interesting for multiple reasons. One, it's becoming a bit of a pattern now. So we saw the Trump administration pull the release of Fable from Anthropic a few weeks back. And here they're at least telling OpenAI you can use it in a certain way. Again, the Trump administration don't really want non-US nationals to have massive access to it. And the other thing that's really interesting for me here is that actually about a month back now, the Trump administration was very close to signing into legislation this exact thing of every single time a new model gets released by a US AI company, big tech company, the US government will have eyes on it and will make a decision whether or not it can be released in full to the consumer market. And at the time, I thought that was a really good idea. Leo and I probably have said several times that rules for enterprise should maybe be different from the rules for consumers. But it was about to be signed, like literally hours away. CEOs had flown into the White House, and then Trump decided to pull it because his advisors said something along the lines of, "This will stop us getting ahead in the AI race." Again, China was mentioned. So for me, you can't have both of these truths. How can you decide not to do it and then just bring it in on your own terms without legislation? So it's a very interesting and evolving news story. And my take on it so far is this is not good, I don't think, when governments become involved outside of due process. And what exactly does ChatGPT 5.6 have that's different or not to Fable? So would love to hear your take on this, Leo.
Yeah, I think my big takeaway from all of this is we've kind of reached a new era in AI. Public model launches are over. And I think OpenAI would probably, maybe I might be a little bit biased. I think that they were pretty smart about how they went about all of this. When Fable 5 came out, OpenAI threw the counterpunch and said, "Okay, 5.6 is coming out." I could be wrong. This is just my thoughts on this. I think that they knew something was going to happen with Fable, that it would get pulled. They probably have OpenAI is known to be a little bit more buddy-buddy with the current administration, and they probably had maybe some insider information that Fable was going to get pulled. And so they said, "Okay, let's see how this all plays out, we're going to announce that 5.6 will be released, and we're going to have a much smoother rollout of 5.6 because we're going to be able to go through the process. So I don't think that it's necessarily that the US government came to OpenAI and said, hey, we need to see this before you release it. I think OpenAI came to the government, excuse me, and said, here, take a look. And also, I think it's a bit of a flex now to have your model need to be gated by the government before it gets released to the public. Like if from now on, if you are allowed to release a model to the public without it being tested by whoever it is in the US government before it gets released to the public, that means your model is weak.
Mm.
So that era is now over. The new era is there's no more public releases. And I think the only thing I can say for sure, aside from who was speaking to who knew what, is that OpenAI was at least smart in throwing the counterpunch.
I think that's true, man. And, Chad makes a really good point. There's such double standards, Chad in the chat, Chad Teal, hey Chad, about how CEOs have been operating. Like we saw Dara Genta like talking weeks back being like, oh, Fable and the previous, enterprise version Mythos is so powerful. It's the most powerful thing we've ever had. It's super dangerous. And then being surprised when the government decides it is super dangerous, right? Like you can't have it both ways. I personally, we always say we're not going to get into politics, but everything's about politics. But without being particularly bipartisan, the Republican Party is founded on this idea of laissez-faire consumerism, right? That organizations to some extent should be allowed to develop within the rules of the law ways that enable them to maximize their profits. And this kind of interfering from a government, from a Republican government, just seems very strange to me. Like, if this was the Democrats doing this, I think there would be a lot more outcry from the Republicans for what this says and also the precedent that this sets as well. I also think you're right in that those public releases are kind of dead in the water. And anyone that does release a model, I've not thought of it like that, but you're so right. Anyone that releases a model that the government just waves through, like now you're subconsciously thinking, oh, it can't be that good. It can't be that powerful.
Yeah, I will just comment on what you just said there. I think like the Republicans say the Democrats can't do anything right. The Democrats say the Republicans can't do anything right. But and like I noticed somewhere in the chat, someone said, unless you release a model that's outside of the reach of the US government, there's nothing that's outside of the reach of the US government on the face of planet Earth. That's the honest truth. And if the US government thinks that something could be a threat in the wrong hands, they're going to get their hands on it. So I think there was no way around this, regardless of political party. This is now how AI releases are going to be.
Absolutely. And, I think Farida's talking in the chat. Hi, Farida Khalaf, about, as you were saying, Leo, this was very strategic. I think, OpenAI probably realized how powerful Fable was and that it had GPT 5.6 lined up. And then there was all these like reports about who dobbed them in, who grassed on them, who snitched in terms of it being too powerful. And there's so much, Machiavellian behavior going on behind the scenes. I mean, because it's not even billions of dollars we're talking about, right? It's like trillions of dollars of infrastructure and investment. And I think people just need to be wary of that and just to go in with your eyes open. And again, we'll point to the fact that you probably don't need GPT 5.6 or Fable to use AI for most of the things that you're using it for, right? So and again, lots of news about how AI is just going to continue being more expensive. So my advice with all of this is just, really look at it with your eyes open, watch what people are doing, not what they're saying, and just, ask about the rationale behind why these things have happened at certain times as well.
Yeah. I will just add, I think that local models are going to be more and more popular as this type of stuff keeps happening.
Open source local models, which are completely free to run and which, we've talked about before, it's not even that. You can see under the hood. Like if you want to know how an AI tool actually works in terms of like temperature, in terms of variables, in terms of like, to some extent how neural nets even work, get a large language model and start playing around with it. Like it's extremely powerful and will be able to do 98 to 99% of the stuff that you want to do anyway. Okay, cool. So, second news story now. This is a really interesting one. It's about Meta. So we talked a little bit about this, I think in previous lives, but basically, Meta have yet again come a cropper with regards to surveillance and security. So Meta, a few weeks back, started this new scheme where they were basically using key clicks and like mouse tracks to be able to monitor how Meta workers were working in the workforce, and then using this to upskill and train AI. Now, there was great outcry at the time because, excuse me whilst I get out the world's smallest violin, but a load of software engineers who'd spent their entire lives creating algorithms that track how we behave suddenly became annoyed that their company was using that same process to track how they behave. And, extreme irony doesn't really cover it even. And so that's one part of the news story. But then the second part of the news story, which I think makes it really interesting, is this has been paused. But the reason it's been paused is not because of any like ethical reason. It's because they didn't do it properly. And so it actually led to a data breach within Meta, where any Meta employee could theoretically then see the personal information of another Meta employee. So, I could go in, if we work together at Meta, I could look at your social security number or like your home address. And that's insane. And also follows on from the story we had like last time, where it was looking at the security breach they had with Instagram. That Meta also owns. So for me, this is two parts of the story. One, who would have thought if you spend your entire career building systems to survey other people that they would be turned on you? Surprise, surprise. And secondly, what are Meta doing with regards to their security? Yeah, I would love to hear your take on this as well, Leo.
Yeah. Just to follow up on that, I think we've spoken about something like this previously. I totally get that side of the argument. And at the same time, and I'll mention this again, if you're working in big tech, is Meta the only company doing this, or are all of them doing it? And Meta's the only one that got caught. So yes, your job working in big tech, maybe in some sectors of big tech, is to learn how to collect data on people and sell that data and use that data. And now it's being done to you by your own company. But okay, let's say you're working at Meta and this is happening to you, and you leave Meta and you go to Amazon or you go to Google. You don't think that they're doing this as well? This is my real opinion on this, is there should be some type of legislation in place where this has to be consensual. It's I don't understand why. There should be something in your contract that when you sign that contract, you are consenting to be surveyed by AI as an employee at one of these companies, rather than just finding out this way. And apparently it was a SEV 2. Basically SEV is like severity of this type of situation. So they have like a scale of 0 to 5. SEV 2 is basically 0 would be the worst. So this was pretty bad.
Just a DEF CON.
Yeah. Yeah. But basically, it was logging keystrokes, clicks, mouse screenshots to train AI. And the question is it being used to train AI to eventually replace whatever job you're doing? And the answer to that is probably.
Yeah. I mean, again, I will bring Karl Marx, socialism, and the alienation of the workforce into play and say, who would have thought that building these systems would lead to this point? And a few people in the chat, rightly so, and I respect opinions, are pushing back to some extent, saying maybe the software engineers were doing slightly smaller bits and they didn't realize what they're building. I don't fully believe that. And I understand that people need to put food on the table, but there are other companies you can go and work for that you can use those skills. Like you need to take a stand. Like if you're fine with building software that surveys other people, like you personally, then that's on you. You then need to also be okay when people start surveying you. Like that's just how it is. But I agree with you, Leo, as well, that it does need to be consensual. It needs to be written into the contracts. Again, slightly playing devil's advocate, maybe it is. Like, who actually reads all the pages of their contract? I don't know what American contracts are like, but like, UK and European contracts can be very, very dense. And I would be surprised if most people read everything in their contract,
Right.
to the extent to which they own their own data or their rights. So maybe some of these companies actually do have it, but it's extremely buried and very difficult to find.
Yeah, I think if that was the case, most likely Zuckerberg wouldn't have had to have pulled back on this.
That also true.
Yeah. He could have said, you guys consented to this, so either be okay with it or leave.
Exactly. And I think a lot of this points to, like, as people are alluding to in the chat, like quite a toxic environment. A lot of these companies, it's all about, shipping fast and breaking. And that extends to people as well as to systems. And I think, yeah. And Chad, I agree. It is not easy to just uproot your life on standards in any field. But I think that people are, to a large extent, like masters of their own destiny. And the kind of job that you're getting into, and you shouldn't be surprised if that company then turns that approach onto you yourself as well. Not to, I don't want to tell people how to live their lives. I just think people should be aware of the decisions they make and then how that might come back to haunt them as well.
Yeah.
And as Alex and others in the chat say, please do read your employer contracted debt. Yeah. It's probably quite a good idea.
I think Farida makes a good point here. There's a fine line between surveillance and controlled environment. Like, it'd be one thing, okay, we found out they're surveying us, but it's another thing when our personal information is leaked to all the other employees and now everybody knows my social security number. It's two different things, right?
Yeah, for sure. And it's one hand saying we're monitoring how often you are on social media on your work laptop, right? That's very different from we're monitoring every single keystroke, mouse click, and then we're putting it into a system that we can't even securely ring fence so that somebody else can see your social security number. That's, that's worrying, I think.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay, so changing tack slightly. This was a really interesting story. It's our third story. This is around, there's a guy called Alberto Cavallo, who was the superintendent of the Los Angeles United School District, which, for context, is America's second biggest school district. Now, he's been in the news because he basically resigned his job, and it was not entirely clear why he resigned. And it's since come out in the past couple of days that he actually was going to be forced to leave. And there's a few reasons for this, but one of the main reasons was that he was basically he was getting funding from a company called All Here Education. Now, when I say funding, things that were documented was they paid for him, for example, to go to the White House. They paid for, I think, a box for him at a sporting event as well. So this is all documented. They're called All Here Education. Now, this kind of stuff happens all the time. That's what lobbying basically is. But what happened was that he was in charge of basically signing up the Los Angeles School District to All Here Education's chatbot for, I think, like $11 million or like a significant amount of money. And it then transpired that this company went bust, and they'd already taken like half of that money and basically done nothing with it. And when people went through due diligence and like went through what should have happened with the procurement process, with when something like that big into the millions of dollars goes out to tender, goes through procurement, what should happen is it changes slightly, I guess, on jurisdiction, but several people should be invited to bid, and then that should go to an independent adjudicator who should then look at the pros and cons of each of those bids, right? And it turns out that All Here Education, prior to guaranteeing delivery of this $11 million chatbot actually had like revenue of $11,000. Now that for me is a huge red flag. And that organization as well, people involved with All Here Education, not the superintendent, but the actually involved with that company, have now since been arrested for fraud. So this is a huge news story. I think it's a great example of not only corruption, but also what can happen with fear of missing out. So if I was to give my most generous read of what's happened with the superintendent, they've thought to themselves, oh, we need to have a chatbot implemented across our system. This looks like a really good one. Let's do that. We need to do something. And has wasted millions of dollars. The obviously slightly less generous read is that maybe something else was going on there if he was receiving in-kind contributions from this company whilst also bringing them in. So yeah, would love to hear your take on this, Leo.
Yeah, I think hopefully we'll find out what truly happened here, but this could just be, it could be two things. Either it's negligence on this politician's part, which I think should also be criminal, or it was intentional. And either way, I think that he should be investigated and prosecuted. But one thing's for sure, taxpayer money has been wasted. That's 100% either way. It's kind of like with these contracts we were talking about at Meta. It's like, do you really read your contract? Do these politicians really go through these companies that they're just throwing money at? Did they know? Did this politician know that this company only made $11,000? And yeah, it was a $6 million contract.
Yeah, that's right. 6 million, not 11 million. You're right. Thank you. Yeah,
paid $3 million up front. 86 days after the launch party, the whole staff was furloughed, and then they were bankrupt by August. So yeah, either way, like taxpayer money just wasted, which I think everybody, regardless of political party, should be outraged by, because where is our tax money really going?
In education as well, which is massively stretched for funds. Yeah, like, and you're right, like $6 million bucks, not 11 million, but that's a lot of money. You know, that could, pay for several dozen teachers, for example. This is related, a story that came out this week. I don't know if you saw this, but because I guess it's applicable. The state of California has now just put into law that teachers have to be human. So I think that's going to be a huge news story, not in terms of making mainstream news, but makes massive ripples. So they're trying to put into legislation that, teachers have to be human, which I think is probably quite a good step. But it'll be really interesting to see how these tensions play out going forward, especially when, like you say, people are either guilty of gross negligence or something slightly more sinister as well.
The fact that that's even a news story, like it's groundbreaking news. Teachers need to be humans. Yeah, no duh. Have we really come that far?
And I think, both of us are like broadly pro AI, and I think there is a place for AI in the classroom, but like certainly not to replace teachers. So yeah, the fact that we have to put this into law and legislation is kind of mind blowing. I mean, again, though, I'm reminded of when Melania Trump rolled out the Plato bot, or whatever she called it. This insane dystopian future. So yeah, great. We've got it in the legislature now that teachers have to be humans. And again, I think it's just, this is really important for people to like follow due process in these things. And like oftentimes this is how people get like how the bad guys and gals get caught out, because they don't follow due process with procurement. Like things which might on paper seem very boring are actually extremely important rules that need to be followed for this exact reason. I mean, anybody could have told you why you handed over a $6 million contract to someone who's made $11,000 in the past year. Doesn't make any sense to me. Yeah, and human as AI is absolutely the definition of a hot take.
The truth is,
Humanity is what's
it's probably on par in terms of like ratios of valuations to like Anthropic and OpenAI.
yes, do you know what? You're not wrong. So maybe he just thought, maybe he was just like, look, this is what the IPO is of Anthropic versus its actual take. It's let's just do a similar scale.
Yeah, like
Cool. Okay. So yeah, moving on that, I guess, into similar where humans are important still. Our fourth news story today is that on the 24th of June, a coalition of nearly 400 community and regional newspapers actually filed suit against OpenAI and Microsoft in the federal court of the Southern District of New York. So basically, what these local newspapers are suing is they're suing OpenAI and Microsoft because these companies have been alleged, have been training their data sets on the news stories, but also like without permission. And critically, this includes paywalled news stories. Now, I don't want to tell you how to do this, but anyone will know it's fairly straightforward to be able to bypass paywalled newspaper articles using completely legal tools, or are sold as legal. And I think that's what's happened here. They've basically stripped out all of the assets. And, apart from the fact this is costing the local journalists money, it's also removing the fact that these have got people's names attached to them. This is people's life work that have gone into this as well. So for me, this is a huge precedent, right? Like local journalism is extremely important. For example, hear about the last story we just heard, like that all got surfaced because of local journalism in Los Angeles calling out this superintendent, right? Like local journalism is extremely important. It's often done far less clickbaity, far more community driven than the popular press or mainstream media. And it's unfortunately going through an existential crisis to some extent at the moment anyway. So the last thing they need is for massive companies like OpenAI and Microsoft to come in, effectively steal all their work, allegedly, and then use it to train their own AI tools and then probably sell that back to some of the corporations as here's an alternative to local news journalism. So yeah, would love to hear your take on that.
yeah. I agree. Obviously, there's an issue with this. I will just mention on the flip side, like who gets who gets kind of the bigger bang for your buck from this whole situation. And I think actually it's the majority of AI users, even free users, because basically now you're getting a chatbot that's trained on all of all of his paywall news for free, right? So that's on the flip side of it. Yeah, it's interesting because if you go into ChatGPT, I'm sure Claude is doing the same thing. By the way, maybe they just weren't called out. Um, but yeah, you're basically you have access to paywall news through a chatbot for free. So I think that's the flip side of it, the kind of bigger bang for your buck side of it. Um, but also to say like, okay, in order for ChatGPT to be trained on that paywalled information, they had to at least pay for one subscription, right? But obviously, um, maybe they should have had something in the contract that said if you're going to use AI to train on this paywalled information, you have to pay up a certain percentage or something like that, which clearly they weren't set up for.
Exactly. And going back to an earlier news story we covered, do you remember when CNN sued Perplexity over alleged AI copyright theft? And Perplexity were like, oh, we didn't know that we're doing it. And then CNN were like, you do because you tried to make a deal with us. And we said no.
Yeah,
And it'll be really, I mean, CNN has a lot more money than local news journalists, even with like 500 or so in like a combined case. So it'll be very interesting to see how both of those play out really going forward. I think New York Times has sued a couple of startups as well. In fact, I think a lot of AI companies are being sued by journalists. Sorry, like newspaper and periodical owners, and rightly so. I mean, it is, and if those go through, then what happens to how other people's work was stolen?
yeah, yep, I agree.
And yeah, I guess for people in the people in the chat as well, local news journalism will mean different things to different people, no matter where they are in the world. Like in the UK, for example, local journalism's always had a very important role to play in covering local like court cases and like reporting that back. Obviously, a lot of community work they do as well. Sadly, a lot of local newspapers have have had to fold, but it's still a very important part of the community, and they tend not to be political. Like, I mean, I don't know how it is in the US, but in the UK, almost all of the major newspapers tend to follow party lines, whereas local news doesn't really seem to do that as much. So it's a very, very important role that they play, and I think in the US as well. So it'll be very interesting to see how this plays out.
They should get Substacks.
And they do. I mean, that's a great example. There was a really cool Substack called the Edinburgh Minute. That's now on Ghost. It's not a Substack anymore, but that does exactly that. It brings local news journalism. I read that every day. It's extremely useful. Shout out to another amazing Substack called Gail's Guide, which basically tells you all the things for young families to do in Edinburgh every week, which I read religiously. So there definitely is a place for that local journalism, and maybe it is on Substack. It's a great point, Leo.
Yeah.
Okay, so now for some good news, right? I promise you some good news. This is an AI good news story, and I think this is really cool. So the Vesuvius eruption, which happened over 2,000 years ago, when Mount Vesuvius erupted and like burnt a lot of people to a crisp, and like basically damaged a lot of like library books and like a lot of learning at the time, which was situated in Vesuvius. Researchers have had these like kind of like hit texts as scrolls that were like burnt shut, and they've tried in the past to unroll them really gently and to be able to read them, and every single time they've done it, they've kind of failed in doing so because it's extremely delicate. So a few years ago, someone had the idea that, look, maybe we could like digitally unroll these with AI. So kind of use an X-ray scanner to scan the ink and then try to put together what it says. And this week, someone's managed to do this. So they managed to unwrap this Herculaneum scroll using AI and to read what it says. So this is like a scroll that is like, it just looks completely burnt and like literally just looks like a log in a fire, right? It's like 8 centimeters tall, 2 centimeters wide. And they basically unwrapped it and like digitally without touching it and read it. And it's this like beautiful, like stoic treatise. It's got some really cool stuff in it. Let me read some quotes. One of them says, one of the passage, the author writes, "We will inquire into something, but we will not grasp it. If in some way we depart from ourselves and from our own nature." Just for me, it's incredibly profound. So this is part of something called the Vesuvius Challenge. I think it's really cool. I think it's a great example of how to use AI meaningfully, and notice how humans are involved throughout. Like humans came up with the idea, humans kind of pointed the AI in the direction, and then humans interpreted that result and contextualized it. So I just want to go on record as saying this is an excellent example of AI and where we should be using AI. Maybe not using AI for like writing comments in LinkedIn, but instead pointing on actual scientific and medical I guess conundrums that need to be solved. And I would really encourage people to check this work out because it is really cool. And I'll put a link to it in the show notes as well. I'd love to your take on this as well.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely amazing. That's just my straight up opinion on it. I think in the sciences and the medical field specifically as well, AI is being underused. Hopefully, will be used more. I think your comment about LinkedIn comments is a great example of where it shouldn't be used. I think human nature will show where AI will be used and where it won't be. But specifically for this, I always have to think about two sides of it, and the other side of it the first thing that really jumped into my head is, and I may be exaggerating, so feel free to correct me. Everybody knows about AI hallucinations. And in my head, I'm like, if AI starts to get used more to read these old historical scrolls and transcribe old, dead languages, um, are we at risk of like rewriting history with AI that's incorrect and hallucinated? And so when I kind of dug into this a little bit, I realized that's actually in this case, that's not the case at all. Um, and I think that's where this all comes hand in hand with the human in the loop. Because when you're talking about the sciences or even like this in history, there's humans there that have been doing this their whole life to basically review the output and basically say this is correct, this is incorrect. And basically what I got from it is that AI can't hallucinate the whole, like let's say like in Greek, it can't hallucinate a whole Greek paragraph that's been transcribed. So it can be transcribed and then reviewed by humans who have been doing this forever, and then say this is correct or this is incorrect. So it's not like AI is going to hallucinate a new history that didn't exist. Um, and there's a direct quote from this. So it's a visibility amplifier, not an autonomous reading system. And I think that's really the best way to say it. This was really cool. I mean, this scroll was sealed since 79 AD.
It's
Um,
so cool, right? It's just really cool. And, you touched on a really important point there. And I'll push back slightly because, we've talked in the past, we're trying to move away from hallucination and use the word fabrication instead. But this points into this wider issue of semantics around AI, that Rebecca Wicker, aka the strategic linguist, and myself have written about, that AI is such a broad term. And you're right, Leo, like when you first read this, it's like, oh, well, you know, what's Claude going to do reading this scroll? And it's going to end up with all these fabrications. And then you're like, no, this isn't what we mean by AI here. This is a very bespoke way of using it that kind of enhances the human ability with multiple checks all the way through. Right. And again, just to really verify, someone did not literally go to Claude Code and say, here's a scroll from Vesuvius, please digitally unroll this for me. It
yeah,
was years of like concerted effort. And you touched on a really good point, like that bespoke use of AI for specific tasks is, I think, going to revolutionize certain fields. We talked about Kew Gardens with botanic plants before. We can see huge advances in medicine. There was another really cool news story this week, a good news story where these people were lost on a hike in Australia and they sent over an AI drone with a thermal AI camera, and it was able to like map the landscape and detect someone's red light from a phone that they were holding up above them. Like that's the AI I'm here for, like every day of the week. But again, it's really important, as Leo has said, to delineate between like the mass consumption of these frontier models and instead bespoke tools that are being created by researchers and engineers and experts, basically.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
There's some cool ideas for like, so Mika in the chat says a future AI use would be scanning our food so it can tell us what it really is before we eat it. I absolutely love that idea. But like at first I read that, I was like, what you mean, like a calorie counter? And then I read it as, oh no, you mean like to check that no one's poisoned us? And I was thinking, I really hope I'm not having to check if someone's poisoned my food every time I eat it, basically. But yeah, that would be a really cool AI use as well.
That could be really useful here in the US.
For checking out the thing,
Like
yeah.
I bought a protein bar. I thought it was all good, and then I read the and it says natural flavors. I'm like, what the hell is natural flavors? Like, well, there's natural flavors and artificial flavors, and natural flavors are still made in a lab, and who knows what the hell is in it.
Dude, a protein bar, get rid of that. Just have like half a pound of chicken instead. Like that's
Yeah,
the way forward.
yeah.
Cool. Yeah, fake food. So yeah, anything else to comment on, Leo, and any of the stories that we've discussed?
Oh, all good. I think we covered it well.
Great. So yeah, thanks very much everyone for watching, listening. Leo will just put into the live chat. We have a YouTube channel that Leo runs. Please do check us out there. For any of us listening on the podcast, please feel free to share with colleagues, etc. We're going to take a 2-week break, or rather a week break, because I'm off. So we'll be back in 2 weeks' time. And in the meantime, thanks very much everyone for joining in, for contributing. Really appreciate it. Thank you, Leo.
Thank you, Sam. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone. Stay safe, be well, and go slow.